Why don't banks adopt it right now? They want to keep making money for however long they can, right? If you're making money off overnight deposits, banks make money off how slow the rails are.
Try sending the gold in fractions of a second from El Salvador to South Africa.
Card, cash in, cash out, send money between users, maybe ACH, and bill payment. But apart from that, there's nowhere else to go. Lightning gives them another opportunity. We get to decide what the financial future in this world will look like.
Welcome to another episode of Teohan's Talk, a show where we delve deeply into Bitcoin, emerging technologies, and the future of energy, computation, and civilization. It is my great honor today to be joined by Mr. Juan Diego Sol. JD is a regional manager at IBEX in Guatemala and El Salvador, an OG Bitcoiner and old-time friend. JD, how are we doing today?
Hey Theo, how are you? Excited to be here. Thanks for having me on the show. I feel honored to be here and I appreciate the opportunity. To give you a little bit on, to give you and the audience a little bit more on my background. I'm originally from El Salvador. I went to school in the US. Lived my whole life in El Salvador, went to school in the US. And then in 2021, when the Bitcoin law came into effect, I decided to move back to El Salvador and start building on Bitcoin at IBEX, first as a country manager. And then in 2025, just a couple of months back, I decided to move to Guatemala, where IBEX also has offices, and to continue regional expansion in these areas. So yeah.
Dope. So you've been in the Central American region for a few years now. So I'm assuming you've kind of seen that whole progression with the adoption of Bitcoin as legal tender in El Salvador, the use of the Bitcoin blockchain in Guatemala and all that.
Yes, 100%. When I heard the news, I was still living in the US and couldn't believe what I heard, that El Salvador had turned Bitcoin into a legal tender. It was something I never thought was going to happen. But I was highly interested in becoming involved in the Bitcoin space before. I've been in the space since 2016, 2017. Always wanted to work in the space, and I think this came about as the perfect opportunity. Being a Salvadoran and already being into Bitcoin gave me the tools and some of the experience I needed to go back home and build. So yeah, I've been in the Central American region for 4 years now building. I'm currently in South Africa. We have a couple of clients here in South Africa, Kenya, Nigeria, and I came over here to go and talk with the clients, be a little bit more present with them, seeing what other tools they may need. To give a little bit I gave a little bit of context about myself, some more context about IBEX. We're a Lightning Network company that leverages the Bitcoin Lightning Network as a settlement layer for fiat-to-fiat transactions. So we use Bitcoin's second layer, the Lightning Network, to do cross-border payments and settlements between different currencies.
Yeah, so you've been building IBEX for a few years, eh?
Yeah, IBEX was founded in 2018 in Guatemala, expanded in 2021 to El Salvador, and since then we started developing our own Lightning Network infrastructure, and we became a global company. So usually it's the case that things happen abroad and then they come to Central America. This is one of those cases where the technology we developed in Central America is getting exported to places all over South America, Africa, and Europe. So we are competing against, our main competitors are companies that are based in the US, that started in the US. However, one of the core things that Bitcoin allows is since everything is open source, it's a level playing field for everybody that's building, right? One of
Yeah.
our main focus is to build corridors between underdeveloped or developing nations and developed nations for remittances, B2B payments, and other types of settlements. And what better way to do that than using an open technology such as Bitcoin, which basically makes everything interoperable. So nowadays we can, for example, send payments from Guatemala to South Africa in less than a minute, end-to-end fiat-to-fiat settlement, which would usually take a bank 3 days, go through many FX, through high FX spreads, and we're doing this at a fraction of the cost and giving the same access to everybody that wants to be able to do it. So using our technology, we can provide any wallet, fintech institution anywhere in the world the same access to these rails, and for them to offer their users, right? So we have wallets and financial institutions using this tech in Guatemala and El Salvador, in Africa, in South America, in other countries, which allows them to operate, allows them and us to operate globally. So even though I'm based in Guatemala, uh, we can build and have clients anywhere in the world, right?
Interesting.
Yeah.
So to like reiterate some of those like few points, IBEX is basically using this like lightning payment system, which is a part of Bitcoin, and then using that to do international settlements between country to country and individual to individual all over the world. Can you maybe like speak more as like how like what's going on like behind the scenes for that to be working?
Sure. So we provide a B2B service. We service only other businesses. So we're B2B to C. So our client may be a wallet or an institution that may have retail customers. So by giving access to the wallet, to the Lightning Network, they can then empower their users to do these cross-border payments. Why do we use Bitcoin and why do we use the Lightning Network? The Lightning Network. What it provides is for instant settlement capabilities, right? So instead of a transaction taking 10 minutes over the main Bitcoin network, we can do settlements instantly. That's moving. A settlement is when the money is moved from point A to point B. A payment is a promise that somebody will send money to someone, right? So Lightning, since the way it works is with finality, all the payments that go through are final and are instant. That allows us to be able to send payments from Guatemala to South Africa instantly because the money moves in real time. You don't have to wait for additional reconciliations, stuff like that. One of the main issues with today's traditional financial system is siloed databases. So if I wanted to do the same movement between Guatemala and South Africa, my bank in Guatemala would first have to debit the money from my account. Then the correspondent bank in the US will need to debit money from the Guatemalan bank, then do an FX change, then send the trade over to another bank that has access to South African rand, and then the bank in South Africa needs to do another database movement. So we've already gone through 4 to 5 different databases, and each read and write on every database is expensive, time consuming, and only works from 8 to 5. But when you have a single database that everybody can trust on and rely on, like Bitcoin, you don't need to trust the counterparty, or the counterparty doesn't need to trust you to verify that the transaction got there. Everything is publicly available. So we are basically leveraging a decentralized single source of truth to facilitate these value movements, right? Whatever amount of money a bank has, they can't do these types of settlements instantly because there's a lot of time, cost, and trust involved. A new bank wants to open their databases to each other. It simply will not will not happen. Similarity to this is how there used to be 10 different internets: AOL, AT&T, Verizon, Microsoft. Everybody had their small walled gardens. And if you were in AOL, you couldn't access anything that was on Verizon, for example. That's how the banking system works today. Is to, but with Bitcoin, Bitcoin is doing to the to money what TCP/IP, which is the internet's open protocol, did to that old system. So that's Bitcoin is the way that in the future financial settlements, financial and value transfers settlements will happen around the world, right? It's like the internet, but for money.
What is this whole TCP thing? So basically, if you're using Verizon, you can't internet with another person that's using a different provider. Or...
So the internet was using different standards in the past. So when the internet first came out, AOL had its own version. You can imagine AOL being my bank in Guatemala, and then Verizon being having its own standard for the internet. They can be the correspondent bank in the US. And then AT&T, they had their own version of the internet, which can be in a similarity to the bank in South Africa. So the problem was you couldn't communicate between each one of them, or it would take a lot of time. It would be costly because everybody was operating under a different standard, right? Then TCP/IP came along, which was an open network, and basically, if AOL, AT&T, and Verizon did not adopt this standard, it would eventually become a cost for them because open networks simply win in the long run, right? The internet, there's only one internet today. You don't have these walled gardens that you did in the past, and that's simply the nature of how things go about. So the same thing that happened to information or different internets in the past is going to happen to money, right? Because nowadays money is just so slow. Information moves faster than money. I can close a deal with somebody in China, but the money will take, like right now, as I'm saying this, but the money will take 3 days to get there, right? Those 3 days is credit cost, settlement risk, and it's time, uh, basically human hours wasted, right? It takes
Yeah.
3 days for the payment to get to the supplier in China. Then it takes for them to send it over somewhere else for 3 days, and so on goes on. Those 3 days have a credit cost that's ultimately passed on to customers so unknowingly, right? So having a better financial system built on top of Bitcoin will basically reduce inefficiencies and make business come by faster.
Yeah, there is no second best internet protocol. Same way that there is no second best crypto asset.
Oh yeah, and there are other ways of moving money across the world, like stable coins and this and that. I see stable coins as basically a digital dollar. You can move it around freely, but you also need trust on a third party that's custodying those dollars, and it's not trustless as Bitcoin is, right? Um, so I think one of the things that will happen in the future is when countries start coming out with their own CBDCs, which is basically programmable money. The U.S. can press a button and take your money, your dollars away, or Guatemala can press a button and take your quetzales away. Every country will come out with this. The problem that's going to exist in the future is nobody is going to want to have reserves of each other's currency because nobody will have ultimate control of the money, right? You're going to need a way to trade in a trustless fashion between countries and different currencies. That can be Bitcoin. It's the most decentralized. It's the most trustless. It works. And even so, taking 10 minutes to send $100 million, it's not that much time when you think about it, if you had to do a settlement on-chain, right?
So I guess that's IBEX's like long-term thesis as there are more of these like CBDCs being rolled out, more regulations, more bottlenecks, people, and like the problem is further and further exacerbated. People would then look towards the solution towards those issues because IBEX does deal with like use the Lightning Network for like stablecoin transactions as well currently, but like the long-term play is on Bitcoin.
So what we want to use and what we use the Lightning Network for is set any type of settlement. So settlements can happen either through Bitcoin or even stable coins, but the transaction gets recorded on the Bitcoin blockchain, which is how we use it as a single source of truth, right? Um, Databases and other blockchains can be co-opted and such. On Bitcoin, you can't do that, right? And behind Bitcoin, there's no foundation, there's no central entity that owns Bitcoin, there's no CEO, there's no CFO, there's no COO. So you also take away a lot of the counterparty risk from uh, from transactions, which at the end it may not be relevant today, but that's where we see the future coming in. Right? There's only one internet. We think there will only be one settlement layer for money, which is going to be Bitcoin, since it's also the open network. So basically, what happened with all these internet gardens will happen with money, right? But Bitcoin will basically take over everything, and even if you're just using it as a database, the future, like proof of the settlement, will be recorded on the Bitcoin blockchain.
Yeah, it does. It
And
does seem like there are quite a few bottlenecks in this traditional financial system that, like you're saying, Bitcoin seems to solve quite a few of them by reducing the friction and having this borderless and permissionless aspect to it.
yeah, correct. That is correct. And we decide to build on Bitcoin because it's also the most open and decentralized protocol out there. And in our experience, our clients are much happier. Like some of our clients use Solana, Polygon, Ethereum, all of these other blockchains and move assets on top of that. But where they see the least friction or least problems, it's always on Lightning. So Lightning is the one that simply works, right? Every day I get messages saying, "Oh, Solana is having trouble. It shut down for a little bit," or "This token on top of Polygon is not working correctly," or this or that. And that's what you run into when you don't have the scalability and network consensus that Bitcoin itself provides, right? So we're building on top of a protocol whose market cap is around two and a half, I think it is right now, $2.5 trillion, right? And it's the most expensive one to attack, and it's open technology, right? That's getting improved through Bitcoin improvement proposals that need to be approved by the majority. There's very smart people working on this. And oftentimes, besides just building on top of Bitcoin, I tell people, like, look at what the big banks are doing, right? BlackRock is buying a ton of Bitcoin. All of them are issuing a ton of ETFs. Like, everybody's already in on this. Um, the big banks are in on this. We've seen attention from financial institutions in Central and South America wanting to integrate Bitcoin or start offering Bitcoin products. After seeing, for example, JP Morgan just, I think, like 2 to 3 weeks ago, started giving out loans with Bitcoin as collateral. So that was a very big news. Um, Usually in the Bitcoin space, there's a lot of hate towards banks. We want to work with banks. We think banks today are simply using old settlement rails simply because that's what they have access to. We want to give financial institutions access to 21st century settlement rails. We don't want to necessarily compete with them. No, banks, they have a lot of the money that's moving around. They have the most clients in general. So we want to actually empower banks to get on these rails, do cheaper, have access to cheaper transactions, and use better settlement protocols to move money around. Sometimes with banks, you can send a wire, and if it takes, for example, more than 2 or 3 days, you call up the bank and you ask them, "Hey, like, where's the money?" And you will never get a straight answer. They what they're gonna tell you is, "Oh, it's floating somewhere, God knows where." They actually banks have like a chat when a transaction gets lost. Like they go in the chat and it's like, "Hey, has anybody seen this money? Where is it? Does anybody have it?" That's the reality of the payment systems, international payment systems that we use today. Swift was invented before the internet, the term internet was even coined, right? That's how old this system is. And all of that old piping needs to be changed to new rails. Right now, we could give any wallet, any fintech access to move money across the world instantly at a cheaper rate and through using better rails than institutions that have hundreds of millions of dollars, right? So access to the technology is, because it's open, it's getting democratized, right? So anybody can start competing against the big banks. Why don't banks adopt it right now? They want to keep making money for however long they can, right? If you're making money off my deposits, of overnight deposits, banks make money of how slow the rails are, right? So when it takes 3 days to send money somewhere else, your bank keeps it for a day, then the correspondent bank keeps it for the day, and then the other bank where it's received keeps it for another day, making float, making interest every night. The incentives to improve aren't aligned. Correspondent banks will keep charging 45, 50, $100 for every transaction until they don't, until they can't, right? So it's like, for example, Duracell's, like the batteries business is not to make batteries last longer. Their business is to make batteries, right? The incentives aren't aligned to do that. When banks will start adopting this, when it becomes, we will adopt this en masse until it becomes a cost tool because somebody else is doing it, right? So I think that's when game theory starts playing out. Whereas if you adopt it today, you can win 100 points, but somebody else, but if you adopt it 5 years from now, you may only get 40 points because somebody else already did it. That's how I think things will start playing out, which is kind of the way the internet played out as well. Everybody AOL had to close down its walled garden because everything started being on TCP/IP, right, on the new open standard. That's the reason why you can send from Gmail to Hotmail to Yahoo to Proton between different types of emails. We want to do the same do the same with money, make money interoperable and create a new standard for sending and receiving money. And yeah, that's like the big, hairy, audacious goal. And it's not the cool thing. It's not only us, right? There's many other companies that also do Lightning. They're starting to see the potentials of this technology for financial settlements. So we don't need to integrate every single bank across the world. We don't need to do all the wallets or the fintechs. It's all complementary. Right? So if one of our competitors or whomever integrates a bank in Europe or in Brazil or in any other place in the world, uh, it's everything is interoperable. right? So it doesn't matter if I set them up with Lightning or if we did. Everything just adds to the network value of Lightning.
Yeah, it's a main like point in Bitcoin. Like my win is your win. So the incentives are just for this shared collective like output.
Exactly. I mean, if I put like 10 banks, 10 bankers in a room, each one from different banks, like none of them will want to work with each other. They're going to see how they get an advantage over the other guy or stuff like that, right? It's for us, it's not like that because the incentives are aligned to be open, to be interoperable, to be transparent. And one cool thing about interoperability is, for example, let's say we integrate a bank in Guatemala and another bank in India has integrated Lightning through another company. Those two banks can now send money between each other in a trustless manner instantly across the world, um, and open new business opportunities and lower costs for financial settlements. Uh, think like in general, like access to technology improves people's uh, lives immensely, right? So lowering costs, for example, in chip manufacturing, metals, gold alloys, semiconductors, all that stuff, made it so that everybody in the world can nowadays be connected, right? Improve the quality, general quality of life of people, including like how they get information, how they're able to talk with their family members, how they're able to uh, anything you want to learn about is available today in the open internet. And all of these revolutions have occurred over the last, say, 15 years, but money hasn't changed at all. So that's where we're betting Bitcoin is. Well, I said it before, but Bitcoin is what TCP/IP was for money.
That's crazy that Swift hasn't been updated like since, or it's the same since before the internet.
Yeah, all the systems banks use were created before the term internet was created. That's why it's just so so slow. And there's always a big talk about financial inclusion. That's a new term, banks and fintechs and wallets and everything like to use financial inclusion, this, financial inclusion, that.
Yeah.
But when all of your tech and piping is based off old technology, there's only so far you can go, right? You can't make the speed of light go any faster. Like these old rails will only take you so far, right? So you may be a fintech giving an instant experience to your user of swiping a card or sending money from one user in your wallet to another user in your wallet. You may have cash in, cash out, maybe have a debit card linked to the wallet, but that's about how far you're going to be able to get uh, if since the bank who's providing you the service is still using these old rails, um, right? So with Bitcoin and the Lightning Network supercharges all of this, right? Every single wallet across Central and South America, so they all have the same four things I said: card, cash in, cash out, send money between users, maybe ACH, and bill payment. But apart from that, there's not more else to go. Lightning gives them another opportunity. And Lightning not only gives fintechs and wallets an opportunity, but also but also banks. Banks are the ones that need to financially include themselves into 21st century rails, right? So then they can give that to their users and everybody else that uses banking APIs or whatnot. Um, yeah, I think that's a very interesting piece. I'm a firm believer that financial inclusion isn't only for the individual; it's also needed for the institution.
Yeah.
And yeah, one of the cool things about IBEX being based and licensed in El Salvador is that we're able to, for the first time, as I was saying earlier, first usually things happen abroad. Now they're happening first in El Salvador, but build something that I am proud of as a Salvadorian. I never thought I was ever going to go back or move back to El Salvador, but this was the perfect reason to do so, right? It's something that's happening, at least on the regulation side. In the Americas, I think there's like 3 or 4 countries with crypto regulation. El Salvador is one of them. So it gives us clear rules in the areas that we can operate in, but also opens up the opportunity for us to build and offer our services globally. So I think besides just like working in Bitcoin, like it feels super good to be Salvadoran and working in Bitcoin, because everywhere I go, also it used to be the case that I told people before I'm from El Salvador, and the first thing they told me was, oh, they kill 20 people every day over there. Now they talk about Bitcoin, they talk about surf, they talk about how nice it is, and all of that. So I think Bitcoin, besides being like an asset and a monetary network, it also provides freedom to places that didn't have. It can provide freedom to places that it didn't have before.
Yeah, it sounds like the Lightning Network, Bitcoin, all of these things are really just the epitome of this like notion of financial inclusion. And these traditional financial banks, they like feel like there's such a concerted effort to appear in this way, but in reality, they're not really checking any of the boxes that Lightning and Bitcoin are. I mean, you could be someone in Africa, you could be someone in Europe, you could be someone in the US, and all you really need is an internet connection, and you have the ability to participate in this like sea of nodes and engage in the Bitcoin protocol. You don't have to. There aren't like all these bottlenecks to like start a bank account or get debanked or any of that. It's it's like perfect financial inclusion.
100%. And like I'm sure banks want to have as many clients as they can. Many times it's the technology that they have available. So these old antiquated rails, besides being old and slow, they're also very expensive. So it's not like banks don't want to have this. It's just there's a lot of baggage and old plumbing and piping that they need to go through. Imagine you have like 100-year-old house and you have to go underneath because all the piping is old and whatever. It's gonna cost a ton of money. You're gonna need to change a bunch of other systems, uh, whatever. It's a complicated process. Este, but eventually you're gonna have to do it, right? When you have a big water leak or whatever, you're gonna have to change it whether you like it or not. Um, so I think
Yeah.
Bitcoin and the Lightning Network will provide the tools for banks to continue growing and scaling as they should.
Yeah, it sounds like IBEX is solving quite a large problem and has a bright future ahead of it. You mentioned these like CBDCs and game theory playing out, and as one country adopts a more efficient system, then more and more of these countries will kind of ensue. How do you see that kind of playing out with the Lightning Network versus like CBDCs? Would it be like one section of countries kind of adopting Lightning and Bitcoin and another half like sticking to CBDCs, trying to like eliminate Bitcoin entirely, or how would you like kind of project this future of Lightning versus CBDC?
So I think CBDCs will come first. All countries, governments usually have an incentive to or will prefer to have control over their monetary supply and financial system as much as they can. Um, So I think CBDCs will come out first before we see a fully Lightning enabled cross-border. Before, like, all the CBDCs will come out first before there is a Bitcoin standard in place. This will play out over a long period of time, but I don't think they're gonna be. It's gonna be. I don't see many things as being mutually exclusive. By this I mean, people usually think in binary, either it's this or that, but it can always be this and that, right? So what we're doing right now, for example, is we're working with both the traditional financial systems and the Lightning Network to do cross-border settlements. So it's not necessary that you pick between one or the other. I think the market, as it always does, will pick the better. We'll end up picking the better option. I did mention before that open networks usually win, right? So you can see CBDCs being the same as the walled gardens that internet was before, right? The game plays out a single way. It may take a lot of time. Well, one thing I always say is, it's the first time this has ever happened, right? There isn't like a certain way to do it, or like a book that you can pull up and tells you like exactly how to do it. So following that same line, like there isn't a certain amount of time that it should take, or way that it will play out. We're building, like, not only us, but there's a bunch of other great companies are building on top of this open network, and a lot of smart people are also on top of it. So I think it's a certainty that Bitcoin and the Lightning Network will, in a capacity, always be involved in this as we transition to an open monetary network, open global monetary network.
And just to play like devil's advocate for a little bit, what would you say to someone that would say that the Lightning Network, because there's a certain degree of anonymity to it, like that would enable kind of transactions to occur that are maybe illegal or that shouldn't be happening, or maybe that would get flagged under like the traditional financial system?
Sure. So regulation is something that many super hardcore Bitcoiners don't like. They're super pro privacy, super pro this, super pro that. But if the goal is to change, well, at least our goal is to modernize to change the financial system, right? The financial system will always work with certain rules and regulations. It's always to protect consumers, to protect companies. It's all in general for protection. If we want Bitcoin to be adopted, or even close to coming to a Bitcoin standard, we need to companies and providers will need to adhere as much as they can to regulations, right? So we're able to work with banks because we're regulated. We have AML manuals. We do compliance on our clients. Our clients do compliance on their clients, right? So if we weren't doing that, we wouldn't be able to onboard a bank that has, I don't know, 10 million customers or whatever onto Lightning or onto Bitcoin, right? And not everybody wants to self custody. I think that's also a big thing. Many Bitcoiners are always like, no, you have to self custody. Don't use a Lightning service provider, this or that. But if you go and ask somebody that's walking on the street, or like your average person, they don't care about self custody. At least not now. They want to be able to send their money freely across the world without any issues, right? So it's like we're building on top of an open network, but using certain regulations and requirements that will allow us to basically include as many people as we can onto this, right? And I think that's just how the world works. You want to self custody your Bitcoin, be private, like go ahead. Um, regarding money laundering and terrorism and all of that, if you go and ask a bank to give you the records of all their transactions or to put make all their transactions public, they will not do that ever. They would rather put up a ton of lawyers, simply pay a fine, and like that's it. Right? You'll never get them to open their books. Bitcoin, the Bitcoin network is open. You can look up any transaction publicly since it was created in 2009. And it's much more traceable than these transactions and systems that were created before the internet was even like a term. So in terms of traceability and all of that, you can trace it, and all of the traditional AML stuff, all of that still applies. Why does it still apply with Bitcoin? Well, you want to work with financial institutions and do fiat to fiat settlements, for example. You need to abide by these rules, or you won't even have. They won't even let you have a seat at the table, right? So unless a Bitcoiner wants to individually go and talk to 7 billion people and convince each one of them to self custody, I think having controls in place will be necessary to include the rest of the world or get the world close to a Bitcoin standard. That's how I see it.
And I guess that's at the center of IBEX's thesis. Like the rails need to change to this more efficient system. It's not that the whole thing from the top down or bottom up has to be re-engineered, but the rails, the settlement layer can be replaced. The plumbing can be done in order to delegate back a certain degree of sovereignty to individuals that kind of because of this current system has been taken away. And
exactly. You can when you're using Bitcoin as a rail, you also have access. You can also self custody, right? So Lightning is a fast way to get the money across, but I can have Bitcoin on Lightning, but I can also have it on chain self custody. So then again, it's not this or that. It can be this and that. The current in the traditional financial system that we live in, you can have your money in the bank, like digitally, or you can have it cash. So that's the equivalent to self custody. You can have it cash under your bed or whatever. But with Bitcoin, you can have both of these. You can have both of these options. And even so, you can, for example, using Lightning, since it's instant, you could initiate a cross-border payment without having pre-funded liquidity. How? You send Bitcoin, and then it gets converted to the other fiat currency immediately in the other end, and it didn't have to go through like a custodian, right? Or the transaction just happened so fast that it spends like 10 seconds in somebody's custody, but it goes through. So I think that's also one of the benefits of Bitcoin. Using Bitcoin and Bitcoin Rails is that it gives you optionality on whether you want to self custody or you don't care about self custody. You just want to get the payment and settlement through. That's also possible.
Have any of your clients kind of inquired about using Bitcoin as collateral?
Yeah,
is that
we've actually
Lightning Network.
So using as collateral for loans. Yeah. So yeah, we have a lot of clients have inquired whether we have those capacities. We actually created a loan module that fintechs and wallets can use to track Bitcoin as a collateral and give out loans. We don't provide the loan liquidity ourselves, but it is a growing business model. I think this year has been and I think next year will also be the year of Bitcoin-backed loans, simply because it's been proven over the past last couple of years that it's an extremely liquid asset. It's something that it's programmable money, so you can program the custody in a way that makes sense, both for the borrower and the one who's providing the loan. You can have like multi-sig setups, escrows, that type of stuff, and it's also easily transportable, right? So if I want to take out, let's say, a loan with my house as collateral in Guatemala, I put on my house, but then the bank's risk is a house in Guatemala. So you're using Guatemala to measure the market risk or whatever. That's how they measure the interest they're going to give you. That's how they measure the LTV they're going to give you. But when you have an asset that's global, doesn't have a single jurisdiction, you can take it. You can like take it or liquidate it if you need to for any currency. There's a pretty interesting scene that starts to play out because it's a bearer asset, and you can easily come up with pretty interesting loan ways to give out loans with Bitcoin as collateral. Bitcoin is just great for so many things. It just makes so much sense, you know.
Right. And like you're saying, there's like 100 years of plumbing underneath the system. And a lot of these traditional finance guys, like they grew up and then they worked like all under the constraints of this system. So I think it's quite difficult to kind of embrace a new idea and see that all of those bottlenecks that were in place were maybe not necessarily, they didn't have any utility now that there's these new rails and on which these international payments can occur.
100%. And one thing that I've seen is I'm 27 years old, but when you go to a large bank or whatever, you look at the board of directors, the people in IT, everything else, they're all like 50 or 60 plus, right? They didn't grow up with the internet. I grew up with the internet from like day one, right? And it's very easy for people to get used to doing things a certain way. So for some, it may be that 3 days is not a lot of time to send money, where when with Telex, which came before Swift, it was 7 to 10 days, I think. So that may seem like a big improvement, but for me, 3 days to get money anywhere, it's just too much time. And I think that's something good because we push ourselves to be better. We don't conform to how things are or how things were. As I said before, like banks want to continue making money as long as they can, doing whatever they can. You know, if they don't need to change, they have no incentives to change. So I can go talk to a CFO of a bank, like a 65-year-old or whatever, tell them like, hey, I have this rail where you can move money to South Africa in a minute. He's gonna be like, oh, you know, sounds nice. He's gonna look a little bit into it and everything, but he's not gonna go crazy for it or adopt it. He can already do that. It takes 3 days, but yeah, that's fine. You know, they don't have to beat around the bush too much. They don't want to get involved in compliance stuff or whatever. It's like they yeah. Yeah. I don't know how to express it correctly, but I feel that the next 20 years, or when I'll be 47 or like 50, will definitely be interesting for money, right?
We're going to be in Unk mode by then. With
Yeah.
talking about Bitcoin, about how in the old days we were in El Salvador at Bitcoin Beach.
Oh yeah. The back when the revolution started, and also talking about like now that you mentioned El Salvador, I remember the first year I got back. 1 year after, a bunch of newspapers and whatever came out with news articles saying, oh, the Bitcoin experiment failed or whatever. Dude, it only had been 1 year, and you had all these attacks coming from traditional financial institutions, people who don't like Bitcoin, and a bunch of, like, again, 65-plus-year-olds that just don't get it, um, uh, attacking El Salvador. And it's always super easy to overestimate what can happen in 1 year and underestimate what can happen in 10, right? So, as I said before, there's no certain way all of this should play out. There's even a lot of Bitcoiners that it's only been 4 years, like, since the law was passed and whatever, that are saying today, like, is El Salvador still a Bitcoin country or this or that? It's like, dude, there isn't a way it should play out. How is adoption supposed to play out? It's never happened before. There isn't a standard, but don't go out and create unnecessary FUD. What the answer to what I think Bitcoin adoption looks like is going to be different from what you think it looks like. But if you use it as an arguing point, it'll just create and spread FUD, right? It's always subjective. There's no correct way to put it. The way I see it, Bitcoin adoption is happening. It may be slowly, but it's going on. It's going on. Nothing happens from night to day, but we're all doing the best that we can. And working in different areas. Bitcoin adoption may be setting up a merchant to take Bitcoin payments. Bitcoin adoption also is setting up a financial institution with Bitcoin and financial cross-border settlement rails. Bitcoin adoption can be having somebody open up a wallet. It's not all, again, doesn't have to be this or that. It can be this and that, right? There's multiple ways to look at it. And if you ask me, like, how El Salvador is doing, it's doing great. It's years ahead out of than neighboring nations. There's a lot of innovation happening in the country being exported to other places in the world. It's like the last thing I ever thought was being in South Africa visiting clients, being from El Salvador, right? I think I can count, like, with one hand, like, companies in El Salvador that have contracts with companies in Africa. We're one of them. This is something that Bitcoin allows us to do, right? Bitcoin is global. You're not geo-fenced to your geography, right? Yeah. Bank in Guatemala will never do business with a bank in South Africa because it's too far away. It doesn't make sense, this or that. But if they could, I think they would be able to figure out something. Those are the routes we're building. I can say we've done the fastest Guatemalan quetzal to South African rand payment ever at the best exchange rate. And yeah, it was a small test payment or whatever, but it's something that no matter how many millions of dollars a traditional financial institution has, they're not going to be able to do it because of the old piping and the plumbing that they have, right? But yeah, that's something pretty exciting.
In the history of humanity.
Yeah, it's
Gonna need to put that on like a poster and get it laminated on the wall,
Yeah. All through open monetary networks. So, sorry, you were saying?
Yeah. No, I was just gonna say when you're dealing with the borderless and permissionless asset, you get rendered those experiences of borderless and permissionless activities. So it's kind of art, and it's very artistic in a way. But yeah, and I think that's also kind of the main premise of like the inspiration for this podcast in itself, because our generation is like coming in, and like I think there's a stat out there that our generation is like inheriting like the most that compared to any other generation ever. And we have this like big question of like where are we going to store this like economic energy that we like produce in our like future professional life, but also that we're inheriting, and also what kind of system we're going to engage in. And I think having this like open forum, open discussion, like is so critical to advancing that adoption. I mean, like you were saying, obviously on the macro stage there is a big degree of like adoption between like governments and like that playing out in terms of game theory, but also definitely on the micro side with just it being used as a store of value for individuals themselves, and kind of like them like realizing that the plumbing is not as efficient as could be.
Yeah, I think um, like at this stage, like we need more people, young people like you, like me, to come into this, because we're gonna be the ones who they always say like, oh, you young people are the future and this and that. Yeah, we are the future. We can decide. We get to decide what the financial future in this world will look like. And like out of my friends, say out of 10 friends, I'm like the big crazy Bitcoin guy and everything, but I will die on this. I will die on this hill, as they say.
I love it. Yeah, I tell all my friends they're Bitcoin maxis. They just don't realize it yet. It's
That's a great way to put it. Yeah,
it's hard.
and yeah, and to the point of the wealth transfer that's going on. I think like everything has become so digital nowadays. And it's everything is becoming increasingly digital. That's where our future resides, right? So it's like somebody already owns all of the land there is in the world or whatever, but not the digital real estate, which is Bitcoin. And yeah, at least for me, we used to have lands which were confiscated in the 70s, 80s in El Salvador. I don't want to go back to having to depend or trust a central entity over preserving what's mine. I want to be able to decide how to store it, how to custody it, how to do everything. I'm not falling for the same old trick again, and it's yeah.
That's crazy. So I'm assuming like certain individuals didn't align with the political narrative or the political ecosystem, and as a byproduct of that, their assets, their economic energy was seized by the government. That kind of
Yeah. Basically, a way to put it is, let's say you have land, your land, and going back to the databases part that I started with on the podcast, the land that you own is as safe as the database that says that it's yours. So let's say a piece of property in Guatemala or El Salvador is as safe or is as yours as what this let's say the entity that keeps those records says it's yours, and that it's a number on a database. That number gets taken away, it's not yours anymore, as easily as that. Whereas if you have Bitcoin, it's yours. It doesn't matter where you go. It can be confiscated. And I think that's a big differentiator between databases, right? The most important record in history is who owns what. One of the most important types of records is money, right? You want to have the database where it's the database that says how much money XYZ person has and the safest as possible. That's what Bitcoin is, right?
Yeah, try sending the gold in fractions of a second
Oh,
from El Salvador to South Africa.
yeah. There's no way. It's gonna take months. You're gonna have to get armed security and like explain to someone, answer a ton of questions like why you're moving this gold or whatever.
Mhm.
Like even gold, let's say if I had gold, I would have a piece of paper that says that I have gold. The gold would be sitting in a vault in London or wherever with another custodian. It's just, or try moving a piece of land, add that, right? Try getting out of a country that doesn't like you or doesn't want you for XYZ reason and taking your land with you, right? You're not going to be able to do that. You can with Bitcoin. And yeah.
Have you seen the stories of like refugees from war, like war torn countries escaping the country and having like Bitcoin wallets and like, storing their wealth through or just storing their wealth in Bitcoin and then being able to come to new countries and then just being able to access that wealth?
I hadn't heard of it, but I hadn't heard of that specific like uh, story, but it's something that has crossed my mind in the past.
Yeah.
Um, I remember when Ukraine went into war, Bitcoin purchases like in the exchanges that were there skyrocketed. Like there was a ton of volume, right? And that just like when you see those types of volumes, it gives you insight as to how people are using it. People were using it as a tool for freedom, right? Taking what we what they had on this earth with them, right?
Yeah.
It's usually the case. You have your money in your bank, your land physically. You can't take either of them. Your like the money in my bank in El Salvador is only worth something in El Salvador. It's not that money has zero worth in Europe or in the US or in Guatemala, anywhere else. Why? Because it's stored in a different database. I can't take it with me. If I want to take it with me, I need to send an international transaction and then take 3 days and whatever. So it's like anything that you own is as valuable as a database or ledger where it's stored at, right?
Yeah.
A bank in Europe isn't going to trust my bank in El Salvador, right? So the key difference with that for Bitcoin is that Bitcoin is fungible everywhere you go. Because everybody has access to the same database, and you can take it with you wherever you want to take it. I think that's something. It's also very very important.
Well, awesome. I think that's the meta point of this entire conversation today. You have this global unified monetary ledger that is Bitcoin. It's fungible, it's international, borderless, permissionless, and because just like the TCAP, just like these internet protocols in the past that were had all these bottlenecks, um, we eventually migrated to this unifying protocol, and the same thing is happening to money. So, JD is we'll cut this part out. I just got nervous.
Yeah, no worries.
um, Word. So I think. All right, so it's been a pleasure learning about IBEX, and it's even bigger pleasure to have an hour of your time, JD. Is there anywhere the audience can find you and find more of IBEX's work online?
Sure. So you can find me on Twitter as Juan Di Sol, JUANDISOL. Uh, or you can find me on LinkedIn as Juan Diego Sol. IBEX, we have our social media is powered by IBEX. I don't post much on Twitter or LinkedIn, but when I do, I like to rant. Um, so yeah, if you're a financial institution, wallet, fintech, looking for lightning rails, interoperability, we're happy to help you with that and connect you with the rest of the network that we're building.
Yeah, IBEX is the place.
Yeah,
All right.
and I appreciate you having me on here, Theo. Este, I was super happy when you told me you were doing like a podcast. I don't see many people like around our age like doing this sort of thing and also being so into it. I'm sure I will just be the first of many others who will come in here. So kudos for that.
Appreciate the kind words, and thanks again for coming on. It's been real.
Yeah, of course.